Hi, and welcome to this installment of Frank and Mary here on Nantucket. If you haven't seen this show before, my name is Arthur Bergeron. My day job, I'm an elder law attorney. I work at Myrick O'Connell, but this show is not about elder law. It's about my friends Frank and Mary. If you've been to any of my presentations at the Senior Center, you've seen them on that park bench. Their goal in life is to live in their house until they die and be buried on Nantucket. They don't want to leave. And so the question that this show is designed to answer is, what are the programs that these folks need to know about, and what do you need to know about, and who are the people you need to know about in order to live in Nantucket for the rest of your life? At this time before this election, one of the things that you really want to know about is how to vote and how the voting system works, and do you feel comfortable with that system? And so my wonderful friend Allison Forsgren has invited someone on to talk to you specifically about that. So Allison, who is talking to us today, and what are we talking about?
Well, Nancy Holmes is Nantucket's town clerk, and she is in charge of the voting process and is a great resource for learning what we can do and what we need to do to get our votes counted. Hello, Nancy. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now Allison always asks me at the beginning of the show just to ask people, how did they get here? Because of course everybody's got seems like it's got a backstory from Nantucket. So how did you get here? Are you a Nantucket person originally? And if not, how did you drift over? And how did you end up being the town clerk?
For myself, I was a summer kid. I started coming here as a small child because my father and his brothers and his one sister all worked here as teenagers in the 1940s, and he always wanted to come back. So he came back 7 kids later in the late 60s, and that's when I first came. And then eventually I met my husband, who grew up here, and we got married a little over 30 years ago, over 31 years ago, and we moved back with our children in the 1990s. And then I started to work for the town of Nantucket in, I think it was 1996, in the health department. Was there for a number of years. Then I took a little bit of time off and I left the health department when I had my 3rd child. And I came back to the clerk's office almost 12 years ago. And I was the assistant town clerk to Catherine Stover until Catherine's unfortunate and untimely passing. And I ran for the clerk's position because our clerk in Nantucket is elected, our town and county clerk, as many of you may know. And I've been the elected town and county clerk for nearly 2 years.
So that's
is a town and a county in one. So it doesn't really make my job very different from any other town clerk in Massachusetts. There just might be a few things related to county that, I might have to say.
because you're the county clerk and as well as being the town clerk.
It's not really a separate job. There's just some things related to Nantucket.
I get it. Well, thank you very, very much for for being willing to come on. I know obviously you're getting a ton of questions, and thanks for coming on to answer them at this important time.
Nancy, what does CMC mean after your name?
Okay, that means Certified Municipal Clerk, and that is an educational and training program that's run through the International Institute of Municipal Clerks, which is a worldwide organization of clerks. And in the states, regionally, we have different regions that run these clerks. They call them academies. And so our region is New England. It's all of New England. But if you are a clerk in Florida, you can go to that school. And so it means that I went to a school of classes for a solid week for 3 summers and did some other coursework and some other things in order to have enough credits to become certified by the International Institute of Municipal Clerks as a certified municipal clerk.
Congratulations.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
That's great. So tell us, kind of in your own words, obviously the election is coming, and I'm sure you're asked a whole bunch of questions kind of all the time. I know from my own perspective, I know one of the questions that keeps coming up is there early voting? If there is early voting, what are the hours? Where do people go? When will folks be getting their ballots this year? I know, and that's kind of all new. And then how does all of that work? Just a bunch of things. I'm sure the questions that we'd be asking are questions I bet you've answered already about 100 times. So if you could just kind of talk about this process, that'd be really helpful.
Sure, absolutely. There's a lot to it this year, as we all know, due to the pandemic situation that we all sadly find ourselves in. And if I forget any of those subjects that you just mentioned, Arthur, maybe you could mention it to me and bring it back. But to begin with, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, our Senate, passed some new laws in July to expand early voting because prior to, we first had early voting in Massachusetts in 2016, and it was just for a certain period of time, a certain couple of weeks. That was when we first did it, and it is only for state elections. It's not for town elections. Due to the pandemic, the state expanded early voting to a complete no excuses vote by mail situation where you can just simply request a mailed ballot. You don't have to say you're out of town. You don't have to come to the early voting period. You can do what's most comfortable for you. So in Massachusetts, you have 3 options to vote. You can vote by mail through an early voting ballot or an absentee ballot, which is the old term we used to use and still use because absentee voters are voters who actually are out of town on election day, the old absentee voter. It's all the same ballot. Whether you vote by mail, you vote in person at the polls on election day, or you early vote in the office for the 2-week period, it's the same ballot. It's the same content. So what the state elections division did is they mailed every voter in the state a little postcard like this if you want to vote by mail. They did it before the September primary, and those that had not filled one out, decided they didn't want to do it, they mailed them to them again for the November election. They mailed them out, I would say 4 weeks ago. So in Nantucket, we've had nearly 3,000 of these. If you didn't get a postcard or you can't find it or whatnot and you want to vote by mail, you absolutely don't have to use that particular postcard. There's also this paper form, an early vote by mail application that was created for the 2020 elections. I've had people call me, older residents, transient people, anybody, maybe your printer at home is broken. And if they need one and they can't download it off the computer, we'll gladly mail it to you. This form is available from a link on the elections page of the Town of Nantucket website, and it is also available on a link from the elections page of the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website. So those are the 2 ways that you can apply for an early voting ballot. And you can drop that application, you can mail that application to the town clerk at 16 Broad Street. We also have a new large drop box that is for the entire town building, including absentee ballot applications and including ballots. It's at the 16 Broad Street entrance across from the Whaling Museum. It's a large brown box the size of a mailbox. You absolutely cannot miss it. If you're in town and you want to put anything, a vote by mail application, a cast ballot, any correspondence you need for our office or any of the offices in this building, you can use that drop box. No postage required. It's checked. Yep.
Don't have to be actually mailing to request a ballot. I can put something in that drop box and you're gonna get it, and that way you're avoiding the postal service and any of those delays right off the bat. That's great.
Exactly. And we've had hundreds of people use that option already, and that box is checked largely by the wonderful staff down at, and the director of the registry, the registrar of deeds. They check it probably 4 times a day. It's very secure and it's checked very often. And that is also a spot where if you live on Nantucket and you're able to come downtown and you want to drop your ballot in there, you can feel very secure about doing that as well. So,
There's no, I mean, you count the ballots here, you collect them. Do they go anywhere besides your office?
Anywhere besides our office?
Right.
No, and it never has, because we've always had voting by mail to a degree. You know, in the country, actually, since the Civil War, Union soldiers voted by mail when Abraham Lincoln was president. But we've always had it. We've never had it to this volume, of course. It's a lot of work and a lot of process. But ballots always stay in the vaults. The town clerk has 2 vaults in our building, and they are tabulated in Nantucket. They will be tabulated on election day at the polls, in the tabulators at the polls, as they have always been. That's how it will be done. On Monday afternoon, we had already had, in the last couple of months since this process started in August with the postcards, we already had nearly 3,000 applications. We got the ballots late last week. We had a team of people help us. Thank you to the ladies at the Salt Marsh. Thank you to the assistant town clerk, Laura and Gail, in my office, and some of our tried and true election workers that were willing to come in and work on preparing these ballots. So we have mailed 3,000 or so as of late Monday afternoon.
And how many eligible voters are there in Nantucket?
So in Nantucket, we have about, of course it changes every day, but we have about 9,200 registered voters. So that's already a third of our electorate.
Wow.
And so now what people have to do is when they get their ballot, as they know, they have to make sure, vote it and return it as soon as possible. Use the drop box. Obviously, if you're not able to do that, or your ballot was going to the mainland because maybe you're in Florida or Boston or wherever you may be, mail it back as soon as possible. We know that there's mailed ballots all over our country. We know that our postal system is working very hard under strenuous circumstances where they have to social distance too in their processing centers. So just mail those ballots right back. I have to say, for Nantucket, for the primary, we sent out nearly 13, and these numbers, nearly 1,300, excuse me, these numbers are unprecedented for us, and we had very few issues with people not getting their ballots. If you happen, sorry, go ahead. If you happen to not receive your ballot, I have asked everybody, I put a message out through our social media, give the post office a chance to do their work. They're working very hard. But if 8 or 9 days go by and you haven't received your ballot and you feel you should have, then contact us, because we are allowed to cancel that ballot out and send you a new one. We've had a lot of people that applied several months ago, and now they're at a different address and they're contacting us for their ballots to go to a different mailing address. So things happen, and we respond to them as best we can.
So I've got a question. What if you apply, for instance, for a mail-in ballot and then don't do it and show up at the polls?
Okay, so that's a great question. That was another, prior to this election, prior to September's primary, I should say, if you had applied for an early voting ballot and you hadn't returned it, if you showed up at the polls, you couldn't vote if you hadn't returned it. The state very wisely changed that law with these new election laws that were passed in July. So if you have requested an early voting ballot and have not returned it, it has not been logged in as returned in our office, you can indeed go to early voting or go to the polls on election day. As long as we have not received and logged in that ballot, every ballot is logged in and tied to a voter. So
Twice is
you can't vote twice. We have a closed state computer system. Every voter is searched by name and a barcode, and only one ballot can be tied to a voter. It's it's just really nearly impossible.
Because I know I was recently we were doing a similar show here in Southborough, and that the clerk was telling us about the fact that, this one of the issues with folks returning the ballot is the envelope that it has to be returned in, and matching up the signatures and stuff. And one of the things he was talking about was they were really encouraging people to return their ballots as soon as possible, so that just in case there was some kind of a screw up, they could try to, go back to the person and say, we want you to know that it was something wrong, and though, you got to try to do it again. So, but can you just talk about that process? Because I think that's really new to some people,
But it's rare. So what happens when you apply for a mail ballot with this form or one of these cards, or even, in Massachusetts, you're allowed to write a letter. You cannot apply for or receive an early ballot without a signature. When you get your ballot in the mail, there's an inner envelope that we call the Affidavit Envelope, and you have to sign it and put your address, your street address on it. If that inner envelope doesn't have a signature that theoretically matches not theoretically, but actually, we're not signature experts, but it has to match the signature of your application, then we can't count that ballot. So say somebody sent their ballot back in the affidavit envelope and they forgot to sign their name. It happens. It doesn't happen too often, but it happens. We cannot count that ballot, and what we do is we contact that person and we say, look, Arthur, you forgot to sign your envelope, so I have to reject this ballot, but I'm going to send you a new one. Or at that opportunity, at that moment, if you were on the island, you might say to me, oh, never mind, Nancy, I'm just going to go to the polls on election day. But you have to sign it. I would say 98% of the people remember to sign it. There's instructions in there. It's pretty obvious. This is the envelope my ballot goes in. It's signed. And those envelopes are opened by poll workers on election day. They're always. Mm-hmm.
And that is because I bet it certainly, when I first heard it, I had no idea that if I screwed up somehow, like I put the ballot in, but I forgot to do the signature, I did something screwed up and mailed it in, that the local person would actually call me and say, it's got screwed up, but you can do this again, and so it's such an incentive for folks to mail it in early, so that if for some reason there's some kind of a problem, it can actually be fixed. I thought it was wonderful that the clerks really, reach out that way to help people out.
Also, the great thing about mailing it early is, there is a lot of process to this, as you can see from what I've been talking about. We have to scan each ballot out. We have to scan each ballot envelope back in. We have to file them and organize them and have them ready to go. At the same time, we have to prepare for the polls on election day. At the same time, we have to prepare for early voting in person, which we haven't talked about yet. So, the city and town clerks have never had this volume. So the earlier you can send it back, the more organized that we can be. We're doing it, but we're working long and hard hours and needing extra help in our offices and to get it done. But, none of us asked for a pandemic, and these new laws do give people choices, and people need choices. They're not comfortable going to the polls, they can vote by mail. They'd rather come into the office, to the town building to early vote, they can do that. They've seen how the polls are set up, they're happy to do that. So there's options for people, which is necessary in this time that we're in. And if you'd like to talk about,
because we hadn't talked about the whole early voting, kind of when can you do it, how do you do it, all that jazz.
Sure. So the early voting period is, per state law, it is October 17th to 30th, 2018. That includes 2 Saturdays and 2 Sundays. So it runs for 14 straight days. The Monday through Friday days are 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And so that's easy to remember because the Monday to Fridays are all 9 to 3. The weekend hours are 4 hours on a Saturday, 4 hours on a Sunday, and they vary a little bit. Most days are 9 to 1, but on the deadline to register to vote for November, which is Saturday, October 24th, our hours are a little different. They're 2 to 4 and 6 to 8 p.m. And this is to coincide with the hours mandated that we be open for a voter registration deadline. All of this was in the newspaper last week. It's on our website. I'll be running 2 ads in the paper the 2 weeks prior to this, which is coming right up, or you can call us. So if you're confused about what the hours are and you don't see it in any of those places, feel free to call us. We'll tell you, or email us, but it's being well promoted. How that will work is you will enter the building through the Federal Street door, and there will be an election worker either outside the door, perhaps if it's a nice day, or right inside with a voter's list, who will check you in and give you a ballot, and there'll be 10 or so socially distant booths in the hallway of the town building. You'll come in and vote. You'll drop your cast ballot in the envelope at our little plexiglass new window for the clerk's office, and then you will exit through the North Water Street door. So 10 people at once will be the maximum we will have inside the building. Only voters will be allowed in. The courts are having some appointments and the Registry of Motor Vehicles, but in terms of the town offices, they're closed to the public except by appointment or for something like this for early voting. So only if you're coming to early vote will you be allowed in. In the past, we've only done this for 2 elections, the 2018 state midterms and the 2016 presidential. It was very, very busy. We had, in 2016, we had, I believe, about 1,800 voters in the 2 weeks. It didn't include weekends. But we weren't socially distancing then. So I'm not quite sure what to expect because nearly 3,000 have applied by the vote by mail. I suspect it will be quieter than 2016. I don't think that people will have to wait in a line outside, but I just don't know. So we'll see how it goes. But that is an option for people. People in the past, pre-COVID, have really, really appreciated the early voting option. And then if not, the polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 3rd. At the high school.
And so I've got a question about the actual ballot itself. Can you just go over what's being voted on this year briefly so that people understand the scope of what we're voting for?
And as I was telling you before the show, I don't have what the state calls a specimen ballot, which is like a sample ballot, to post online yet or to show you on the show yet. But I do have the official, it's the same thing. I have to wait to receive the samples from the state to post them online because this could be replicable. So this is only held in the office. This is the ballot that was sent to everyone that has applied so far for an early voting ballot. This is an early absentee ballot. It's the same content as what you'll see on Election Day. All ballots are the same. And what we have on here is, of course, we have the offices for president and vice president. We have our statewide Massachusetts senatorial race. We have our representative in Congress race. And then we have our first district councilor, which there is no opponent in that race. We have our local senator in general court for Cape and Islands, of which there is no opponent in that race. We have our local representative for Barnstable, Dukes, and Nantucket district. There's no opponent in that race either. And then we have our local register of probate race. So those are the races that are on this ballot. And then we have the 2 questions that we've all been hearing about all over the TV. There's just 2 of them, but they're both very long. The first one, question 1, is the proposed law that is regarding motor vehicle repair. And if you'd like, I could just read the summary of what a yes or no vote on question 1 would mean. Okay, so again, Question 1 proposes that motor vehicle owners and independent repair facilities be provided with expanded access to mechanical data related to vehicle maintenance. And then there is a long couple of paragraphs about that. But the upshot is a yes vote for question 1 would provide motor vehicle owners and independent repair facilities with expanded access to your wirelessly transmitted mechanical data related to the vehicle's maintenance and repair. A no vote would make no change in the law governing that mechanical data. So that's question 1. We've all seen the pro and con commercials about that one. Then there is question 2, which is in regards to ranked choice voting. And this is a fairly complex issue. The state also sent every voter this guide, Information for Voters, which has a lot of detail about the 2 questions. I'm not going to go into that, and I don't feel qualified to expound on the detail of them. But question 2, the law proposing ranked choice voting, a yes vote would create a system of ranked choice voting, and a no vote would make no change to that law. So for those, if you're interested in those, you've got to do a little reading, a little research on your own. And as with all ballots at any election, if there's ever an office or a question that you don't want to vote on, you don't have to. You can leave anything blank that you prefer to. So.
This was tremendously helpful. And Allison, thank you for reaching out to Nancy, whom I hadn't met before. But it was this. I think this is just really informative for folks. A lot of folks, the Franks and Marys of this world, are worried about this. They always vote. They want to vote, but to know that they have these options, especially of voting and staying at home and not having to go to the poll, it's really wonderful. So.
Quick question for you, Nancy. Do you need any help at the polls? There's been a outreach for people who are under 60 who could possibly help out either or maybe both at the polls on the day of the election, or other help that you need. Is there a place that people can go to volunteer?
Ask that, Allison, because another change in the law that happened this year is that we don't have to use sworn and approved election workers if we are running short, because of course a lot of cities and towns, big cities and towns, are having issues, and understandably a lot of the standard poll workers are not comfortable with working that day, and it's a personal choice, and that is completely understandable. I have had so many people, there's online programs where you can sign up to be a poll worker. I've had so many young people reach out through that, through emailing myself or my assistant Laura, calling us. The outpouring of offering, people stopping me on the street, the outpouring of offering of help has been incredible. In terms of preparing the early voting ballots, the ladies from the Salt Marsh, Laura Stewart, Ann Medina, and Jenny Carrera, came out numerous times and helped us prepare that, as did some of our election workers. We kind of had to try to have them work in, often they were husband and wife teams or family members, because we have to social distance in our building as well. So right now we are okay. We are okay because about half of our election workers still want to work. And I do have a great list of reserves of people that have stepped up and reached out and said that they would help too. So at the moment we're good, but we are always happy to hear from anyone and add to our list, because normally election workers are sworn in as a group by the select board each year. I give them the list, and it's just sort of a tacit swearing in, but they see who's on there, and the state has changed that we can reach out to anybody, even if they've never worked at elections before, even if they're new to town. So we greatly have appreciated that resource. Yeah.
Allison, thank you. This has been great. I think it's going to be very helpful for a lot of people. So Nancy, thanks very much for coming on. And Allison, it's always great to do these shows with you. And folks, we hope that this has been informative for you. And as Nancy has said, she's dying to hear from you if you've got any questions. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next installment of Frank and Mary here on Nantucket. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.